David Bobzine,
Here.
Donald Abbott, Ed Lawson, Von Hartung,
Present.
Jean Herman,
Here.
and non-voting member Veronica Frankel, absent.
Okay, I know that Councilwoman Breckus is on her way. Let's see, if we could have Sienna Reed lead us in the pledge, please.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, approval of the agenda. Do we have any issues that we need to address before?
So moved.
We do not.
Have a motion and a second, a discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Go to item 4, approval of the minutes. I don't know if anyone has anything that they saw. I did see something on the 24th. I believe it's page 6, last line. There's an errant plural for, I think it's exception is what I saw, or no. It's an E word. Hang on, I have my notes. You've got, so it's the 24th.
24th or the 26th?
I'm sorry, August 24th meeting. And it is. This page here, engagements rather than engagement target, just an errant S. That's all it is. Okay. Any
Motion
other
to approve
changes?
as amended.
Motion to approve both minutes as amended.
Yes.
And a second. Second from Commissioner Herman. Thank you so much. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Item 5, public comment. Do we have any public comment today in the audience?
We have none at this time.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
We also had for approval August 10th governing board meetings, or governing board meeting minutes.
Yes, I tried to clarify the motion that it was for both.
It was for both.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Yeah, we're good. No worries. Okay, item 6, consent agenda.
Second.
Motion to approve. Second. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. No, I did not. I asked for it, and I was told that there was no public comment. Thank you.
See, I'm not paying attention.
No, we're running and gunning. We're running and gunning. All right, business of the day. 7A, RPGB Resolution 1703, Resolution of Appreciation for the Service of Charlene Bybee as Chair of the RPGB 2016-2017. Let me see if I can get this up real quick here. Do you have the copy?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Mr. Hartung.
When did Miss Bybee become a basketball player? It says here that she's a globetrotter.
Now, wait a minute. Don't steal my thunder.
Sorry, sir.
Allow me to read this, and then we can have discussion. Resolution of appreciation for the services of Charlene Bybee, 2016-17 Chair of the Regional Planning Governing Board. Whereas Charlene Bybee served as the Chair of the Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Governing Board from August 2016 through August 2017, providing steady leadership to the board, the Regional Planning Commission, and the Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency. And whereas Charlene Bybee, during her tenure as Chair of the Regional Planning Governing Board, shaped the 2017 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan update through discussion of the overall scope and process, identifying a regional vision and direction, and for the use of MetroQuest as one of the community engagement tools. And whereas Charlene Bybee supported the Regional Stormwater Network Work Program with the Western Regional Water Commission, and whereas Charlene Bybee guided the dissemination of the results from the Truckee Meadows housing study throughout the community, and whereas Charlene Bybee supported and guided the decision to involve the RPGB and TMRPA in the Truckee Meadows Roadmap to Affordable Housing in conjunction with the Truckee Meadows Healthy Communities, and whereas Charlene Bybee deliberated issues through including legislative matters, the practice of regional planning, and provided guidance and support during the 2017 legislative session. And whereas Charlene Bybee, during her tenure as chair, sought to engage the board members collaboratively on regional issues And whereas Charlene Bybee always brings her compassion and inclusivity to the meetings, and whereas Charlene Bybee is our very own high-flying, globe-trotting world traveler, and whereas Charlene Bybee consistently and effectively exercised her responsibilities as a member of the Regional Planning Governing Board calmly, fairly, and efficiently with strong leadership, clear direction, respect for staff, and a commitment to the benefits of regional planning for our community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Regional Planning Governing Board does hereby extend its sincere appreciation to Charlene Bybee for serving as a member of the Regional Planning Governing Board and for her countless hours of public service on behalf of the citizens of the Truckee Meadows. May I get a motion?
So moved.
Motion and a second. Motion and a second. I believe this constitutes the discussion. Any rebuttal?
I didn't realize, we did an awful lot last year, and I will have to say it was a learning experience for sure, since I've always said that planning has been my biggest learning curve since I got elected, and I'm really glad that the mayor appointed me to this commission to begin with, and then to serve as chairman was an honor. It was a little more challenging and a little more excitement than I anticipated in the last year, but I think it helped me grow, and I think it helped this group grow, and I think moving forward, we are all better for. Sometimes you go over a few rocky roads and come out better on the other side. So really appreciate staff, has been amazing and so valuable. Kim and her staff and what they provide as chairman for me to take the reins of this organization. I'm pleased to have done it, and thank you all, and thank all of you who serve on it for the work that you do as we look to regional plan and our update, and thank you. What else can I say?
Thank you. Commissioner Burke-Bigler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would just like to say that on behalf of Washoe County, although I know my colleague at the end of the table is going to have some comments to make, so I'll say the nice ones. I want to tell you, this committee, how impressed I am with this city council person from Sparks, and what an excellent job she's doing, and how pleased I am to serve on this committee with her, and I think she did a superb job, and on behalf of Washoe County, thank you very much, Charlene.
Commissioner Hartung.
Mr. Chairman, all levity aside, Charlene, you did a wonderful job. You led us effectively, efficiently, without trying to corral opinions or hold back thought processes to come to the table. It's extremely important in regional to always be able to talk about our own entities and how they're affected regionally, and I think that you gave each one of us a fair and even-keeled platform to do that, and I thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other comments for our student? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Herman.
I just can't thank you enough for leading us through this past year. It's been wonderful to see how successful you've been, how you stood us through the year. So thank you again.
Anybody else? Okay.
I want to swill her head up.
All right, there you go. That's the word from Sparks. We got you. That's how they roll in Sparks. Okay.
The counties are currently on my side, maybe because I'm sitting in the middle of them.
Yeah.
I'll just put it this way for me at Reno is I always like coming to these meetings so I could see you, Charlene.
Oh,
you know,
that's very nice.
No, really.
Yeah, no, that's
It
good.
gave me a good feeling. So,
That's cool.
and there was that.
That's right. We just live vicariously through all of our air travel. Yeah. All the far-off places she goes to.
And I understand we're going to be on another committee together with Ms. Herman, and so I'm looking forward to that too. The animal services.
Okay. All right.
The three of us.
Okay, so do we have a motion? I think we had a motion. Do we have a second? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much, Charlene. It was a great job.
So what we were going to do is we were all going to say no.
I know, that would be, that's right.
No, that would be mean. We wouldn't do that.
Okay, 7B, yeah, don't give me any ideas, come on. Public hearing, Regional Plan Amendment, RPA 17-004, consideration and possible adoption of the RPGB Resolution 1704 regarding an amendment to the Truckee Meadows Service Areas, TMSA, to expand Washoe County's portion of the TMSA by including an 80-acre site located immediately north of the developed area of Sun Valley. Ms. Knox.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair and board members. For the record, Lauren Knox with Regional Planning. So this agenda item starts on page 37 of your packet. Just give 1 second, there we go. All right, so before we get into the proposed amendment, I just want to provide a quick overview of the Truckee Meadows service area. So per the regional plan, the TMSA is defined as areas within which municipal services and infrastructure will be provided. This includes the high-intensity core areas and the existing and planned urban and suburban uses. In terms of amendments, policy 1.1.6 of the regional plan allows for additional lands to be included within the TMSA that are currently within the rural development area or the future services area. Additionally, there are policies that govern in the regional plan that govern the process and requirements for an amendment to occur, which we will touch on a little bit later in this presentation. Since an amendment to the TMSA is technically considered a regional plan amendment, the general process and review factors for all regional plan amendments are used. This includes the fact that regional plan amendments can be sponsored by the governing bodies of each of the 3 local jurisdictions, the Regional Planning Commission and the Regional Planning Governing Board. All right, so this specific request was sponsored by the Washoe County Board of County Commissioners at the request of the Washoe County School District. The request includes expanding the boundary of the TMSA to include an 80-acre site into Washoe County's portion of the TMSA. For reference, this site is also currently within Washoe County's future service area, which is the area outside of the TMSA that's defined for future inclusion into the TMSA. The land is currently owned by the Bureau of Land Management and is part of a larger 640-acre parcel that's not included in this request. I want to make an important note here. Since the land is currently owned by the BLM, it's considered designated public open space. Per the regional plan, designated public open space is considered part of the development constraints area. So upon transfer of the property to the Washoe County School District, this DCA designation will be removed. So the analysis completed by staff on this amendment took this into consideration. All right, so let's take a look at this site. This map is on page 45 of your packet if you want a little bit closer view. So this is the context regionally, and as you can see, the site is located north of the Sun Valley area. And if we get in a little bit closer, you can see the site is directly adjacent to the developed area and the existing TMSA north of Donatello Drive. This map's also available on page 43 of your packet. So just to provide a quick overview of the Washoe County TMSA as it pertains to this request, Policy 1.1.7.1 describes a calculation for determining the acreage allowance within each jurisdiction's portion of the TMSA. If the jurisdiction's portion of the TMSA as calculated is exhausted, then Policy 1.1.7.3 allows for development flexibility acreage. This was a one-time 640-acre allotment that each jurisdiction got. With this request, Washoe County will be utilizing the development flexibility acreage defined in Policy 1.1.7.3, and per agency records, the allowed development flexibility acreage within Washoe County at this time is 244 acres. So this request includes a total of 80 acres. However, there are slopes over 30% present on site. These slopes are considered part of the development constraints area. Thus, the calculation for the net increase to the TMSA would take the slope area into account. As you can see overhead, of the 80 acres, 1.2 acres contain slopes. Thus, the net increase in this request is 78.8 acres. And the request is within that allowed acreage, and as you can see, there'd be about 165 acres remaining. All right, so let's walk through the analysis. As a tool to better analyze TMSA amendments, an evaluation matrix was created, which allows staff to analyze a request based on an agreed upon criteria. Also, for any regional plan amendment, Policy 4.3.6 of the regional plan requires that the items listed on the slide overhead be considered. A majority of the evaluation matrix discusses each of these criteria for the topical review factors listed above. This full analysis was included as part of your staff report, but for this presentation, we'll briefly touch on each of these topics. So in terms of regional form and pattern, the site is currently within Washoe County's future service area and is adjacent to the existing TMSA. Also, it's directly adjacent to the existing developed area. So again, the proposed site is directly adjacent to an existing residential area, and staff believes that synergy between the existing development and the proposed amendment would exist. Also, as indicated by the Washoe County School District, a school facility at this site would support the surrounding residential area, as currently students are bused about 5 miles away. Due to the unique nature of this request, the land will only become usable by the Washoe County School District and for a school site specifically. The school use may produce more employment in the area, however, staff anticipates minimal impacts to the overall jobs and housing balance. So again, the amendment site is directly adjacent to existing development, thus existing services and facilities are also within proximity to the site. The property is also anticipated to be annexed into the Sun Valley General Improvement District service area for water and sewer, and information provided indicates that the GID does have the capacity to serve this project. There are existing roadways to serve the site, and a traffic study was provided, which indicates minor mitigation measures that will need to be taken. And then, as noted in the previous section, infrastructure improvements are acknowledged. Also, the traffic study mentioned before indicates that no change in the level of service on the roadways is anticipated. All in all, the impacts to service levels and fiscal impacts are considered to be minimal due to the nature of the proposal, as well as the proximity to the existing services. Then, as mentioned previously, a slope analysis for the site was performed and indicated that slopes over 30% are present on site. This accounts for approximately 1.5% of the entire site being considered development constraint area. Again, this doesn't include that public open space designation. Also, there is an existing BLM trailhead present on site, and the Washoe County School District has indicated that they will work with the BLM to relocate that trailhead. So again, the 6 factors above were analyzed for this proposal. The RPC voted unanimously to this board to recommend approval, as does staff. So a suggested motion is overhead, as well as on page 41 of your packet. I'm available for any questions, and we also have Washoe County School District staff available.
Do we have any questions? Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a perfect opportunity, and this is going to be a resounding theme for me today. It's going to be a consistent one. Why does this have to come out of Washoe County's bucket in the TMSA with respect to, and I recognize what 1.171 state and 1.1.7.3 state. I get that, but here's reality. When this comes out of our bucket, it's not development that we would have normally sanctioned per se. So in other words, this could be 3 dwelling units per acre. And that capacity for 3 dwelling units per acre would be far higher, the requirement for capacity for sewer, water, traffic, all of the infrastructure required. This is really a request by another public agency, and in my opinion, the 1.1.7.1 and 1.1.7.3 are flawed. And so I'm supportive of this, but this is the perfect opportunity to talk about why we need a regional plan update and get rid of this sort of bucket scenario with respect to the TMSA, because this does not apply to Washoe County. This really should not come out of our allotted amount of capacity in the TMSA. With that, I would be happy to make a motion.
Councilman Breckus.
Well, I think that's a very interesting point my colleague brings up, and I object to this proposal in other ways, but I'll depart from the point where he left off. I will start from the point where he departed. Say a decision had been made by the school district to cite this critical infrastructure, educational infrastructure in an area that was more central to Sun Valley rather than the far edge toe of the reaches of the valley up into the development constraints area, public land. and say, maybe around Fifth Street where the Scolaris is and some land down there or something, how do you calculate the bucket if it's redevelopment commercial land with high-intensity commercial? How does the bucket calculation go on if another decision had been made that would be, reusing land that's already been dedicated to development in unincorporated Washoe County?
Right, so the bucket in that case, if it's already within the TMSA, then it wouldn't affect the bucket.
Okay, so a decision was made to spread the urban footprint here. It's a decision that I have problem with. I have a problem with taking land out of, our natural buffers of open space. I see in the staff report, and so this is a question, few, if any, infill sites exist to make perhaps this large public investment in anchoring for this community in some of those areas I mentioned. What methodology did the school district pursue to look to rather than thinking, oh, there's free land that the federal government might, dispose of to the school district? Do you know that methodology?
I do not know that methodology, but a member of the school district is here, and I think they'd be appropriate to answer.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. My name's Adam Searcy. I'm with the Facilities Department School District. As the report alludes to, there were several sites considered within Sun Valley. One in particular is owned by the GID off of West 7th Avenue. Another site was purchased, actually we were outbid on, purchased by the LDS Church several years ago. Ultimately, as far as your question specifically, rationale, it was essentially cost effectiveness as well as proximity to the service population, the zoning, which would be effectively the entirety of Sun Valley. As you know, Sun Valley is very densely developed at this time and significant land required for a school of this size. So this has been something that's been discussed with the GID many years in the past, and ultimately with the passage of WC1, we're able to move forward with it and found that this to be the best opportunity in our estimation to pursue this project.
Thank you very much for that explanation. May I follow up with one question? I guess I was just out there, and if you consider maybe 5th or 4th Street, the middle of Sun Valley, from where I see this land is to 5th or 4th Street, the busing is the same as if some of the kids are being bused from that central area out to Hug High. So I get that community identity of we want a middle school in Cold Springs, and it is not Sun Valley, it is in Sun Valley, but I'm at the point, and this came up to me maybe years ago when DeMonte Ranch High School was put at the far reaches of the valley, and then it really is in a public investment that I think spreads land. It doesn't stop there. It continues to go on. Frankly, I don't think our public investment should be the front line of suburban sprawl, and that's what I feel this is. I think we have a nice natural public lands buffer, and I think we should expect more from our public investment to be community anchors, and Sun Valley has some nice community anchor features. I don't know the specifics of what all went on in the siting, but I'm not comfortable supporting taking this land out of the reserve, frankly. But may I ask one other question? Does the GID run their own sewer system? Okay, they do. They have a plant and all. Okay.
That's right. And we're actually making some minor infrastructure upgrades to appropriately support this facility within their system, both for water and sewer and roadway, as Lauren mentioned.
Yeah, and I get the fact that there will be some ability for walk-in traffic from the Highland Ranch area and all, but I just don't think it's serving as the community anchor that we should be looking for at this point when we invest $100 million. What is these costs?
Slightly less than that, but it's a tremendous investment.
Yeah, I think public investment should further and advance other community goals, and those goals really are reinvestment and centralized in the urban area. And the Reno Master Plan draft says, have school siting advance other goals. And when you have to go through gymnastics of changing a regional plan, obviously it's not advancing other goals that you have because you're changing your goals to allow this to come in. So I'm not supportive. Thank you.
So Commissioner Hartung has requested, before we
I have a follow-up question. So what you're saying on the other locations, like I'm looking in the middle of this TMSA and the other open TMSA that's more south, west in the Sun Valley, there was not other parcels more in the heart of Sun Valley that could incorporate? It's middle school with possible elementary school as well, right? So you're looking at a larger piece of land.
Probably the most relevant example is the Sun Valley GID owned parcel immediately to the southwest of West 7th and Chocolate, if you're vaguely familiar. This is as you start to climb up O'Brien Pass and head into Golden Valley. We discussed that at length with Sun Valley GID. It is arguably more centrally located within Sun Valley, and found it to be far more challenging for the development, right? Would ultimately be very much more expensive. And then accessibility-wise and utility-wise, the roadway network, the utility network was inferior to this particular location. Again, beyond that, very challenging to find developable land on the order of 25 acres for a project of this size is the minimum footprint, right? The 80 acres in this instance stems more from a BLM kind of requirement. They don't divvy up their lands in 27 acre, but they want it a clean, they call it an aliquot part. So that's how we ended up with the 80 acre piece. We had to show a plan of development that contemplated full utilization of that property, which is where you get the elementary school or other contemplated school uses. The property will be bound for school use only in perpetuity, but the primary scope is the middle school.
Okay, and I understand that. Sitting on the school oversight committee, which is responsible for those WC1 monies, and that it's spent effectively, doesn't make sense to go to another location for any school site where the costs are going to be too high. The costs are going to be too high. We've got to be accountable, all of us in the community, all of us that are elected do, and I do, especially sitting on that committee. So I appreciate if you're looking at other sites that were more central, but the cost was higher. I can appreciate that. I don't think the location it's not a problem for me. It's right near all the residential. It's not sitting way up in a corner out of the way with more roads as far as roads and residential. It is at the edge of it. But if there was not property more centrally located that we could do, you could build the schools at the same cost. And the fact that it is a large enough for other school uses down the line, I think is for, looking forward, is forward thinking. And I think that's something that I support, because I think that's something we need to do in looking to the future for when you do need another school or other school uses. So thank you.
Commissioner Herman.
When I think about the money that's being spent for the land for the new school in Spanish Springs, I'm just thinking you guys are doing the right thing with what you're doing with BLM, because I always look to the taxpayers and think, well, how's this going to impact them and their taxes? And so I think it's a real wise move, and I agree about the location being good for a school because it's at the edge of an area that is very large. The Highland Ranches and the stuff between there and 7th Street, there are a lot of people living in that area and lots of kids. So I think you're on the right track. I'm supportive of it, totally.
Commissioner Burke-Bigler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am a strong proponent of infill, and I think infill is very important. But in this particular case, I actually think that's what this is. As Ms. Bybee indicated, Councilwoman Bybee indicated, we're looking at a school location that's really right at where all the students are. Sun Valley is a huge community that's, I don't know, what is it, 35,000 something, some ridiculous number. It's a significant community with no school, no middle school in it, and it really needs one. And because that's a family community. It's a family-oriented community. So it is a community of young families who have children who are going to be going to this school. So it's not like we are going to be busing kids from some other faraway area into the school. We're actually going to be building this school for the purposes of these children who live in that area. So I'm a strong proponent of infill. I think infill is an excellent idea when it's appropriate. This is a good cost for a good school. And I personally think we can consider this infill because Sun Valley is, in fact, a growing community, a large growing community. So I'm very supportive of it.
Do you have any other questions or comments before I give a second to Commissioner Hartung? Mr. Lawson.
Can, and maybe this for staff, explain to me what the DCA calculation is.
So the DCA calculation is, sorry, for the record, Lauren Knox. The DCA calculation is basically taking what is defined in the regional plan as development constraint areas. So that's wetlands, slopes over 30, public open space. I think there's a couple more in there. And so the calculation on this site specifically was based on a slope map, which showed that there was 1.2 acres of slopes over 30% present.
So, and then as far as the 244 acres and then subtracting out the 78.8.
Yeah.
That 165 acres is for all of Washoe County?
No, that's for Washoe County's portion of the TMSA. That is the amount of,
Doesn't affect Sparks or Reno?
no.
So then once they get over 165 acres, what happens?
In that case, and this is something that we are talking about in the update, but in that case, once that 165 acres is exhausted, unless there is a big change to the amount of TMSA that Washoe County has per the other policy, which is 1.1.7.1, there would be no room for expansion for the TMSA, for the Washoe County's portion of the TMSA.
So I'm just bringing this up is because I like to be the devil's advocate, but keep in mind that you guys are looking at a lands bill that has industrial area on it, and 165 acres is not a lot. 165 acres is not that much. So I'm I'm throwing this out there so you guys consider it. It's not going to affect Sparks or Reno, but it definitely could affect the county's growth in the industrial sections that when the lands bill gets approved, that it could affect your ability to build.
Commissioner Hartung.
Mr. Chairman, and to Mr. Lawson's point, that's why we really need to review this process of 1.1.7.1 and 1.1.7.3. I mean, you're spot on. This whole bucket thing is really inefficient at best in the 21st century. My question, it actually piggybacks on Mr. Lawson's question, but it also piggybacks on Ms. Breckus's question. What's the cost of and Adam, this is for you, what's the cost of a middle school now? What is it, I mean, what are they, what's the going rate?
So, as Ms. Bybee mentioned, again, Adam Searcy with the school district.
And approximate it for me. Just you can give me round numbers.
The building itself is estimated at this time to be on the order of $58 million.
Okay, so $60 million for the building.
The building itself, this site has some unique terrain and challenges associated with it. All in, grading, retaining walls, paving, landscaping, site utilities, we're estimating on the order of $15 million.
An additional 15,
So
so
we've-
you're at 75.
Right, we've got some professional services, things of that nature associated with delivering a project of this size in a quality and efficient fashion. We recently received funding allocation from the Board of Trustees of the school board for, I believe, approximately $85 million for this school site particularly.
And does that $85 million take into account contingencies, or is that?
It does.
A plus 20% perhaps?
Not quite that amount, a little less than that, but there are contingencies. These are estimates. These scope elements actually will be competitively bid in the near future. So our
So it could realistically, and this is not beating on you, Adam, this is
No,
not
this
the
is fair.
intent. It could realistically be $100 million, and you didn't have to buy the land.
It's highly unlikely that it would reach $100 million. Every effort has been made to refine the design and estimate it with a high degree of accuracy so it will not exceed our allocated budget amount.
Still
But
85 million bucks. I mean, boy, that's
absolutely,
that's a
it's
whopper
a
for
very significant investment.
Okay, and now I'm just trying to get a feel for this. And again, it's not that I'm opposed. I understand completely. You guys were talking about the DCA calculations, and the reality is Lauren. So there's only the footprint is 25 acres of the school.
Approximately the actual parking lots and building itself is about 25 acres.
Playground.
Yep, all in about 25 acres.
I call it a playground. Fields.
Yep.
The play areas. Okay, so that's gonna take up 25 acres.
Approximately.
So you've got another 55 acres of open space and I realize that, for lack of a better term, I'm going to call it deed restricted. You can't do anything with it. I can't come and build a 7-Eleven on it or, something of that nature, put houses there. It is restricted by the BLM.
Yeah,
But-
for school use. So
Right.
it's very flexible in that term, but school use, it will remain undisturbed with this project.
Right, understood. But we're still being nicked for 80 acres out of our allotment. So you see where my frustration is. And again, I'm supportive, but this is a reason for my frustration. And
You
so
should be able to grow your allotment, is what you're saying.
yeah, I mean, and actually allotments, in my opinion, if I may, Mr. Chairman, allotments, I'll just give you, this is one commissioner's view. Allotments should not pertain to public facilities like schools. This is a regional school. This isn't just serving Washoe County. This is not just going to benefit Washoe County. This is going to benefit kids from all over the place. And so
Okay.
kids from the city of Reno are going to be going here.
Point made. Yep.
So, thank you, sir. I
Okay.
appreciate it. And
Thank you.
I would make a motion to approve.
We still have more discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Brook-Bigler.
Thought we were.
Thank you. And I can't disagree with what Commissioner Hartung is saying, and I certainly understand the concerns revolving around the fact that we as a county are limiting the amount of land we will have for development. But I think that's the purpose in revising the regional plan and updating the regional plan. I think that's something that hopefully we'll be able to talk through and resolve that concern as we contemplate further and future growth. And so I appreciate Councilman Lawson's point. I think it's very valid, and I appreciate that you understand our concerns. And certainly Commissioner Hartung is our lands person, so he really understands these issues, and he's working very diligently on behalf of the county to sort of resolve some of them. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of clarifications. One, the 85 million that was approved just recently by the school board was in addition to 4.5 million that had already been approved, but that's neither here nor there. The other part is the idea that there's going to be an elementary school beside this junior high school at some time is kind of a stretch, given the fact there's an elementary school basically across the street, which also has a bunch of surplus acreage around it. That I don't know if anybody looked at the possibility of utilizing that acreage surrounding that school for a school, but that's neither here nor there either. As far as centrally located, Sun Valley has 3 elementary schools and spread throughout Sun Valley, and this is the furthest reach from those elementary schools that you could get and build something in Sun Valley. So it's not centrally located to the children that attend school in Sun Valley. So with those being said, I don't have an opposition to changing this for the move forward on this because, we're already paying $90 million for this school based upon a BLM proposal. If we have to buy land too, we're going to be well over the 100 million.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion. Commissioner Hartung, you ready to make that? A motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and opposed?
Nay.
Okay, and motion carries. And to Commissioner Hartung's opening point, we are appreciative of the county's contribution of their portion from their bucket to make this whole WC1 program move forward. Okay, item 7C. Public hearing, Regional Plan Amendment, RPA 17-005, consideration and possible adoption of RPGP Resolution 1705 regarding an amendment to the Truckee Meadows service area to modify the boundaries of the City of Reno's portion of the TMSA by removing 3 parcels totaling approximately 1,091 acres located near Winnemucca Ranch Road, 30 miles north of the Interstate 80, Interstate 580 system interchange, and designating these parcels as rural development area. Ms. Knox.
All right, thank you again, Mr. Chair and board members. For the record, Lauren Knox, Regional Planning. All right, so we already talked about the TMSA and amendments to it in the previous item, so I'm going to spare all of those details. But for reference, this request was sponsored by the City of Reno. The request is a bit different as it's actually removing City of Reno TMSA designation from a 1,091 acre site, which would then designate that site as rural development area per the regional plan. The regional plan defines the rural development area as the area outside of the TMSA. The RDA consists generally of dispersed residential, employment, and other uses that do not require the provision of municipal services. Additionally, the RDA requires that new divisions of land may not create parcels less than 5 acres in size. So let's take a look at this site. This map kind of provides some context regionally, and you can find this on page 155 of your packet. As you can see, this site is located pretty far north of the main portion of the TMSA. In fact, it's about 25 to 30 miles north of the Spaghetti Bowl as the crow flies. So when we zoom in, you can see the site is directly adjacent to Spring Mountain. However, it's not a part of that development. And this map is also available on page 153 of your packet. Again, approval of this proposal would roll the TMSA back in this location and place the property into the rural development area. So per policy 1.1.7.1, which describes the calculation for determining the area allowed within a jurisdiction's portion of the TMSA, the City of Reno is over-allocated by almost 1,000 acres. You can see from the calculation on the slide, when using the net acreage associated with this request, approval of the request would shift Reno's TMSA allocation back into the positive. Again, net acreage is determined by taking the entire site and removing the development constraint area located on site. If this proposal is approved, the City of Reno would have almost 50 acres available for future expansion per this policy. So I want to note that for this proposal, the evaluation matrix that you heard about in the previous item, it's not an appropriate way to evaluate the proposal, as that matrix is really intended for properties seeking inclusion into the TMSA. So we refer to policy 4.3.6 of the regional plan, which requires the items listed overhead to be considered for regional plan amendments. We'll go through them again. So in terms of regional form and pattern, the site is currently in the TMSA, though removed from the larger developed portion of the TMSA, as it's approximately 30 miles north of the Spaghetti Bowl. The request includes removing the TMSA designation from this site, which would subsequently designate the site as rural development area. As stated previously, the RDA, as the name suggests, is intended to be rural by nature with dispersed residential and non-residential uses that do not require the provision of municipal services and infrastructure. And the RDA designation is more consistent with the property and what the property owner would like to see in future development of this site. So the property owner anticipates that they would like to eventually develop the property as a large lot residential development with the understanding that the RDA requires that sites be 5 acres in size or greater. Again, for this type of development and residential use, the RDA in a more rural setting is more appropriate. Again, the property is relatively far removed from the more heavily developed portion of the TMSA, thus the jobs housing balance of the region will likely not be impacted substantially. In terms of the provision of services and infrastructure, one of the reasons that this TMSA amendment is being requested is due to the lack of services and infrastructure that are planned for this area. The RDA does not allow for the development that requires the provision of municipal services and facilities, so it's a more appropriate designation for an area with a lack of planned services and facilities. In regards to natural resource constraints, there are slopes greater than 30% present on site, and the RDA designation in the more rural type of development will honor that natural topography and resources on the site. So again, the 6 factors overhead were analyzed for the proposal, and the RPC did unanimously vote to recommend approval to this board. And, oops, there you go. A motion can be found overhead as well as on page 150 of your packet, and I am happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we have some public comment on this item before we continue. Mr. Crater, would you like to join us?
Thank you. Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Ken Crater, and speaking on behalf of the owner of this property, Bob Marshall, our group is in purchase of this parcel, in contract with this parcel right now, and we've got topographic mapping and are working on a record of survey. And it became very apparent very quickly that the 30-mile distance between this property and the Spaghetti Bowl is just not conducive to high-density development within the city of Reno. And clearly, I think all the work that this body has done on updating the regional plan and looking at intensifying development within the core area to reduce backbone infrastructure cost, it just made sense that this needs to be taken out of the city's sphere of influence and put into a rural development area. We're not absolutely positive on our plans yet. At most, we would be able to develop 5-acre density lots on this property. We're also considering possibly putting a portion of it into a conservation easement. And we did this recently on a Hidden Hills project in Reno, east of town. And that turned out to be a win-win for the community. But I think the most compelling thing on this property is we were out there this summer when that awful fire started at 395 in Hurlong and moved right through this valley, through the middle of the mountains. And we were out on site the day that they had some of the most intense activity fighting fires. And there's a large pond on this property, and the helicopters from the Air Guard were taking pond out of this property to fight the fire. And if this project were to develop per the previous plans and was taken to the city's sphere of influence, it would have been unsafe to draw water out of that pond with high-density development surrounding it. So just in terms of wildland fire, this property needs to be in a rural development area with the rural setting and large density lots to protect the safety and serenity of this area. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Crater. Questions from council, Councilman McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and until I was looking through the staff report on this, would you go back to the map?
Yeah.
The next one that has
The other one.
the bigger picture there. This is, the way I understand this map, there's a huge amount of sphere influence still up there, and when we looked at this at council, I was under the assumption that the whole thing was going away. And have you guys, Mr. Crater, does your client own the rest of that as well, or is he just trying to purchase this part of it and going to develop it sensibly, and we still got to deal with the rest of it?
That's correct. We do not own, the other property is owned by a different owner, and that will have to be developed or dealt with on a second, different matter. But we're going to work with that property owner because I think clearly the writing's on the wall as far as I can see that it just doesn't make sense. So we're going to work very closely with them, and I know they've already put a portion of their property into a conservation easement, but whatever it would cost $1 billion to bring backbone infrastructure out here, there's just better options for land in that area. So we will be in contact with them as we move forward to try and figure out what's best for the community and the property owners out there.
When I looked at this map today and going through the staff report and saw that this is just a sliver of the ill-conceived notion that preceded us, I thought I was under the assumption we were getting a better deal out of this, but thank you.
I believe we had Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Lauren, I'm a little cloudy here, and this goes back to my reoccurring theme. It talks about removing, for even numbers, we'll call it 1,100 acres, 1,091 or 93, something like that. Removing 1,100 acres from the TMSA. How is it possible that this got put into the TMSA when no infrastructure existed to begin with? And so therefore, I would like to open up a bank account with monopoly money. I'm going to put in a few $1,000,000, but I want to move that over to a real bank and call it real money. The capacity never existed here. And so it's not like saying we're going to put something into the TMSA or remove something from the TMSA where capacity already exists. Well, let's just say in Spanish Springs, like Section 33, which is right above the high school. Capacity exists out there already. There is no capacity whatsoever in this valley. So how can they transfer the capacity when it never existed and use it elsewhere where it does exist?
I think that's a difficult question to answer. This was a decision made in 2006, so I can't speak to exactly why.
I'm not mad at you, Lauren. Don't.
I know,
I'm not-
it's another
I'm not-
bucket issue.
I'm not shooting
I know.
arrows at you. Please know
Yes.
that.
Yeah, it's something that staff is definitely committed to talking about in the update, how the TMSA is calculated, all of that. So we are committed to that discussion. We want to have it.
All
May
right,
brief.
and you know.
I believe that was
perhaps-
more of a point than a question.
Perhaps it was a
Yes,
rhetorical
yeah, I got it.
question,
I gotcha.
and it just it makes no sense to me, and I get it. Now, I do have one last question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. It's going to go into RDA, and it essentially rolls back to. Is it going to roll back to Washoe County's planning jurisdiction? So it'll be
Yeah, it'll be part of Washoe
Right.
County's planning jurisdiction, but
Right.
not the TMSA.
not the TMSA.
Yes.
I get that. Okay, all right, but it will be Washoe County's planning jurisdiction.
Correct.
No longer the city of Reno, even though it's still technically, because there's this little green spot up there that still is in the SOI.
That's
Okay.
correct.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. Councilman Breckus.
I just, had a little history with this area and, how this got in and the other property and just, in my opinion, putting it into the sphere was really a mockery of regional planning tenets and shows how, abuse can occur and provided a lack of credibility to good planning ethic in this region. Just put it out there. But those who were involved in it at the time would say things like, well, it's never going to happen, so who cares? What does it hurt? It really is when you get into what's going to be the city, what's going to be county, what are we going to keep in rural reserve, where are we going to expand the service areas, that the real tough decisions need to be made, and sometimes it's not so clear. So in small defense of those who were involved, but, I think that because it was always so far-fetched, it wasn't as egregious as, possibly some of the other things we're going to be inheriting soon that come on the premature march of our ability to serve development in this region. So leave that at that, but I will make a point to many who don't know, the other area is more complicated because on top of being in the sphere, it has some vesting authority with the plan unit development issued by the city of Reno, which is the first time ever, I think, in Nevada law, that a plan unit development has been issued for an area that far away from a city and not even annexed into a city. So it really, I always thought, had some very perplexing legalities to it almost, and maybe that would be something, if the conversation pursues, is to understand the nuance of having a PUD outside of your corporate boundaries. I've never understood how that could happen, but I don't think it was contested in court.
Commissioner Herman?
Okay, this is right down the road from me, so. I don't really see much of a problem with it, but my feelings are that we should not allow any building until we have 4 lanes, because we have, our roads are not that big, and we're gonna have a big problem if we start allowing them to build on it. But as far as this development starting and being zoned properly and all that, I'm for it, because it has to happen out there.
Councilman Bybee.
Lauren, I have a question on, so that the other larger big green box up there, We are only talking about just that little sliver, and I too support it. Just makes so much more sense for it to go back to rural development area. But in the meantime, what are the possibilities or what can happen? I know it's a separate property owner, but given what happened with that large piece of property, what happens next with that? I mean, what are the possibilities, and can development occur there? And is that something will be coming back to us, or do we know?
Yeah, so as Councilwoman Breck has pointed out, it's kind of convoluted up there because there is a planned unit development handbook. But the steps until that could get developed, what would have to happen is it would have to be annexed to the city of Reno to be able to provide services. So that'll be a city of Reno process. It'll have to go through their typical development review process. So most of that would be just through the city of Reno for that to get developed as it stands right now.
But at this point, it can't be annexed.
At this point, that is a decision of the city of Reno. We're just really looking at the TMSA
Right.
portion.
Okay, any further questions or comments or discussion on this? I will spare you my history on this property. Motion to approve and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, thank you. Item 7D, consideration and possible ratification of the recommendation of the Washoe County Home Consortium directors for the allocation of second-round funding for FY 2017-18 funds for the development of affordable housing projects in the amount of $440,000. And I believe we have some late-breaking updates on this for our consideration that are different from what you have in your packet. So I'll let Ms. Knox take it away.
Correct. So for the record, Lauren Knox, Regional Planning. So I'm actually going to start this presentation just to provide some context on the Washoe County Home Consortium, and then I'm going to turn it over to Washoe County Home Consortium staff so that they can go through those complexities. All right, so just to provide some background, the Washoe County Home Consortium was formed through an intergovernmental agreement between the cities of Reno and Sparks in Washoe County in 1994 in an effort to improve the provision of affordable housing throughout Washoe County. The Washoe County Home Consortium receives and administers the Home Investment Partnership Program, or HOME funds, and also provides a forum for addressing affordable housing issues within the region. In order to implement these goals, the intergovernmental agreement further establishes the Technical Review Committee, which is tasked with making funding recommendations to the Washoe County Home Consortium directors. The directors are the city managers of Reno and Sparks and the Washoe County County Manager. The intergovernmental agreement requires the RPGB to ratify the final funding allocations that are forwarded by the directors. So the processing of home funds for the affordable housing projects began with an application process. 3 applications were received and forwarded to the Technical Review Committee. To consider the applications, the Technical Review Committee held public meetings in July and August of this year. The TRC voted to recommend approval of the Ridge on Watt project and the Sky Mountain project to the directors. And the directors reviewed and discussed the funding recommendation made by the TRC, and forwarded their approval to this board for ratification. So now I'm going to turn it over to Silas Scarborough and Elaine Wiseman.
Okay, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Silas Scarborough, Management Analyst for the City of Reno, for the record. I am also the City of Reno staff person to the Washoe County Home Consortium. It's my first time in front of this body, so.
You're doing great.
Yeah, okay, so this is regarding the second round of home funds for fiscal year 2017. At the beginning of 2017, the Washoe County Home Consortium had about $1.2 million to allocate for affordable housing projects on a competitive basis. You might recall that this Steamboat by Vintage project was approved at Geiger Grade in South Virginia Street by this body in April of 2017, and they were approved for $750,000. So the remaining funds today, the $440,000, are basically the difference. The TRC decided during the middle of the year that it was a good idea to open these funds back up on a competitive basis. So the Ridge House requested $394,000. Sky Mountain by Vintage Housing Development requested $425,000, and then there was a proposal for Flood Reef for housing rehabilitation by the CSADC in Washoe County. The TRC made a recommendation to fund the Ridge House for $340,000, and then the Sky Mountain by Vintage for $100,000. The late-breaking news that we've had just within the past 2 weeks is that the Ridge House determined that they have a conflict at 1694 Watt Street, where they had hoped to purchase a home and then rehabilitate it for the use as a group home facility. They decided that they had a conflict at that property, and they withdrew their application. And we understand that decision, and we actually agree with it. We hope to work with them on many other projects going forward in the future. So what you're looking at today is the Vintage Housing Development Group decided that they wanted to remain on the agenda and continue forward with this, their request for the $100,000. Now, you'll notice that they actually applied for $425,000. They will plan to ask for or reapply for more home funds at the next available funding date. The $340,000, after speaking with RPA legal staff as well as city staff, determined that it was their direction that $340,000 needs to actually be sent back to the TRC for their review. So really what we're only looking at today is the $100,000 request for Vintage Housing Development. So our plan, our long-term goal, actually more short-term, is to bring this item, the $340,000, back to the TRC, back to the directors, and then back to this governing board at the next available date. We would like for it to be sooner rather than later, because next year that we have to allocate those funds and sign agreements with projects, or we risk those funds being recaptured by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So just a little bit about Sky Mountain. It's a affordable housing development that will be using a combination of low-income housing tax credits, home funds, and tax-exempt bonds. A resolution of support for Sky Mountain was approved by the City Council in October earlier this year. I think it was October 11th, for $18 million. Sky Mountain would have 288 units, and 5 of those units would be for home-assisted units. So all of the units, all of the 288 units would be affordable for households at 60% of the area median income. The 5 home units will be considered affordable for very, very low-income households, those at or below 50% of the area median income. The project is located in the former parking lot of the Great Western Marketplace building. Is that correct? I'm sorry, I've only been in Reno for 1 year. I came from the Midwest, so I'm still trying to. Oh, is it Super K? So they will need to get a site plan review approved by the planning department, but that's an administrative review. It's not a zoning change or anything like that. The Vintage Housing Development has met with planning. It has been approved, but staff doesn't anticipate any planning hurdles at this point for this project. But if you have any questions, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
I believe what we had, don't go away. Question from Mr. Hartung?
I have a question for legal.
Okay.
Mr. Azevedo, because of the way this thing is styled, I see that it's styled in 2 sections. It's styled to look at Ridge House on Watt for $340 and Sky Mountain for $100,000. Are we okay with just approving a portion of this and not the entire thing? Is that okay? I mean, do we have that capability in our purview?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, yes, you're okay proceeding in this regard at the $100,000 as requested. To go back a little detail, what happened was, with regard to these 2 projects, They originally came forward as styled in the staff report, and then as discussed, one was withdrawn. And they wanted to increase it for the body's consideration today. The intergovernmental/interlocal agreement that actually brings this body into this process specifically contemplates ratification. So it contemplates the process at the local level, the WRC, the directors approving it and bringing it forward. Otherwise, we could have brought it forward, but that has to happen first. So to answer Member Hartung's question, yes, you are okay proceeding forward today on the 100,000. And if the other part comes back at a later date, then you can consider it at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Azevedo. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Breckus.
I am supportive of both projects and disappointed to see the one on Watt Street go away. It's in my ward. I walked by it actually about a month ago to just check it out. And but the other one is also in my ward, and very, very excited about the redevelopment of that property, the old Kmart site. Good to see that it can be done. Sites can be found. But also, I think going back to the TRC will be interesting to see. It sounds like there's an appetite to reapply for more home funds, but the council took some action yesterday in dedicating some land toward a project priority that they have that I would presume would need some layering subsidy. And I think the Housing Authority has already talked about project-based vouchers for that. And I'm sure, however that proceeds, home funds would also be looked at. I don't know if we're self-directing anymore or if the timing would work, but I'm sure it's something that'll be discussed at the TRC.
Councilman Dorr.
Question. Also on this, first of all, I'm supportive of this project. Think it's a good project. But I was curious about the flood rehabilitation and why they did not consider it. I mean, I read that they weren't sure that the housing prices were low enough, the poverty rate was low enough in Lemon Valley as compared to the rest of the region. I was kind of surprised by the thinking. Is there anybody who could address, in that it's in our memo and it wasn't recommended for funding? And it was also unclear to me when I read it what kind of rehabilitation they were even talking about. So,
Okay, so for the record, Silas Scarborough, Management Analyst. So the recommendation was specifically made by the TRC, not from staff, to not fund the Lemon Valley Homeowner Relief Project. In our opinion, it was a home eligible activity, but the TRC just made a decision not to fund that project.
well, okay. I mean, they do need relief out there. I mean, these homes are in the county, not the city, but we've certainly heard a lot. They come to our every meeting at our council, and they seem in need of some kind of support. So, did the people who is advocating on their behalf, did they not make a good case for it, or?
Well, the Community Services Agency and Development Corporation made that proposal on behalf of the Lemon Valley homeowners. The CSADC has actually done single-family homeowner rehabilitation projects in Sparks and I believe other parts of Reno.
Okay.
So they have the experience and the staff to do single-family housing rehabilitation.
Yeah. Well, I understand our role here today is just to ratify the 100,000. We can't even go further because that's not been recommended. So certainly we're not going to consider this flood rehabilitation because it's not even on the list to be recommended by TRC, right?
Well, for the record, Silas Scarborough. If we take those funds back to the TRC, it would be our intention to allow Sky Mountain or Vintage Housing Development and CSADC for the TRC to re-review those projects and potentially allocate more funds to either of those two.
All right.
But we would not necessarily open it up to other applications.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's other funding. There's FEMA grants that are available at the state, but I have a lot of grants require a match, and I didn't know if these kind of funds can be used as match for other funds like federal funds or state funds. So.
Hi, good afternoon. For the record, Elaine Wiseman. I'm the manager for Housing and Neighborhood Development for the City of Reno. Just real quick on the Lemon Valley Flood Relief proposal. At the time that that project was proposed, they didn't have sites identified yet for the houses. They didn't even have the extent of damage to each house. It wasn't
Not
ready.
ready for prime time.
Correct.
Makes sense. Because I was having a hard time trying to figure out what houses, what rehabilitation, so it's very clear.
Yep.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, and I, for one, appreciated the candor of the staff report on that particular, just the concerns about the applicability of the home funds for the specific use, whether or not it would be enough to do it, and so, okay. Councilwoman Bybee.
I do have a question on, so the $340,000 that was supposed to go to Ridge House will go back to your board for reconsideration. Is Ridge House possibly with another location able to reapply again? Or is your process only that this money could go towards this project, or is that all up to your board? I mean, just curious. I know it will come back to us, but kind of give me an idea where that $340,000 is going to go. Hopefully to good use, not just sitting with not being used.
Right. So we have two different things happening right now. We're about ready to enter a new funding round. So we just got our new home grant from the federal government as well as the state. So we have a new funding round that's starting. So then we'll also have this $340,000 roughly floating around. So we could add that and release it with the new funding. Or we could go back to the TRC and have them recommend that they fund Vintage in full for the full amount that they originally requested. The application has already been received and it's gone through, the projects that were selected have already gone through 2 public hearings. So that's another scenario. But ultimately, it's up to the TRC as that being the technical review committee for these funds. It's up to them what they want to do with the funding.
Okay, so Ridge House is out for right now, and they would have to find a new project, possibly come around to your new funding cycle in the upcoming year?
Correct, if they have another project.
Another location, okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a motion.
I'd make a
Oh,
motion.
excuse me.
Oh.
Do we have any public comment on this item?
None at this time?
Seeing no public comment,
I'd make a motion to allocate $100,000 to, see how it's styled here, to the Sky Mountain by Vintage project.
we have a motion. Do we have a second? Any discussion on the motion? I'll just say I'm excited about this. I think this is to Councilwoman Breckes'
gonna be
points, this is going to be a really great concept proved up, and hopefully we'll be seeing more of this in the near future. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you so much. Okay, item 8A, members and directors' reports. Let's start off with AI 2017 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan update. Ms. Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have quite a few things to share today. One, I'd like to talk a little bit about the response we're getting to our survey. We've had over 1,500 responses at this point in time. A lot of good comment. We're getting quantitative and qualitative information. The survey is going to remain open through December 1st at this point in time. Once and only by zip code.
All 1,000 clients. It's stuck as much as Story County stuff.
Commissioner Hartung, thank you for bringing up the numbers. Additionally, we did finish the process for the regional plan update consultant, and I wanted to share a little bit about the process with you. As you know, we went out for an RFQ, request for qualifications. We had 9 responses, which was quite frankly higher than we thought it would be. We identified 4 to interview, and the interview panel was 1 member each in terms of staff from Reno, Sparks, Washoe County, and the Regional Transportation Commission, and TMRPA staff. After we did that first round, we had 2 identified that we wanted to talk to again. We did a second round conversation at that point, and we are in the process of completing the contract right now. It is an out-of-state firm. It is actually Echo Northwest who helped us do our housing study. I would say that it was a very close conversation, and we were really impressed with the high quality of the responses that we received. Additionally, I went before the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission. I received $10,000 from them to support a sustainability study that's going to support the regional plan update. We're expecting completion on that in December, and we've hired a local consulting firm, EMPSI, to complete that work. And finally, the funding has been raised for Phase 1 in the affordable housing project for Enterprise, and the contract is also being signed with them. And there's an expectation that Enterprise will be making a visit here in mid-December at this point in time, hopefully coinciding with your meeting, so maybe they have the chance to come and talk to you. And those are most of my updates.
Wonderful. And our next meeting is December 14th, 2017.
I'm sorry.
December 14th, 2017. Yep. Okay, do we have any reports from members? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Azevedo, do we have any legal counsel report?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, 8C, our Board of Trustees member is absent, so we'll get that next time. Item 9, request for future agenda items. Do we have any? Okay. Closing public comment, item 10. Do we have any further public comment?
We have none at this time.
Seeing none, thank you so much. Written correspondence, number 11.
We have none.
Item 12, Councilman McKenzie's favorite agenda item. Motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. We'll see you. Thank you.